The one thing that the previous version of the Secure Act 2.0 did not address was what happens if a beneficiary inherits a retirement account where the original account holder had already begun to receive required minimum distributions. Would they have to take RMDs from that account as well, or would they be exempt from RMDs and simply have to fully distribute the money by the end of the 10-year period per the Secure Act 1.0? I remember that the financial planning community, when this first came out, was absolutely up in arms. They were like, this is a crucial omission. How could you not opine on what's going to happen to people who are beneficiaries of IRAs where the RMDs were already being taken out? Well, in the latest piece of legislation, this is all spelled out perfectly.
A tax freight train is bearing down on your retirement. To protect yourself, you'll have to harness the power of zero.
Welcome to the Power of Zero show. This is your host, David McKnight, best-selling author of The Power of Zero, Look Before You Lerp, The Volatility Shield, and Tax-Free Income for Life. Don't forget about the soon-to-be-released The Infinity Code, which will be coming soon to fine bookstores near you. If you're looking for someone to help you navigate all of the pitfalls that stand between you and the 0% tax bracket, head over to davidmcknight.com. Happy to connect you with a member of my elite POZ advisor group. Among the very best tax-free retirement planning specialists in the nation, trained, vetted, qualified personally by me. If you are a financial advisor and are looking to level up your game and adopt Power of Zero principles into your financial planning practice, then head over to powerofzero.com and opt into the free 3-part video series. At any point during that series, you can set up a phone call to chat with our team. If you are looking to buy any of my books in bulk, I'd recommend you do so at davemcknightbooks.com. You can mix and match titles, achieve bulk discounts, and you will get them less expensively than you will at Amazon. Jeff Bezos does not always have the best deals. I would appreciate a follow on Twitter. It's at McKnight&Co, at McKnight&Co, or on Instagram at David C. McKnight. Also, would love to subscribe on my YouTube channel. If you haven't gone there recently, I would suggest that you do so. There's a lot of new content, a lot of new video up there. Check it out. A new series of videos, frequently asked questions you're going to want to find out more about. All right. In May of last year, I did a podcast on the Secure Act 2.0. This is the follow-up to the original Secure Act that, among other things, completely killed the Stretch IRA and Stretch Roth IRA and instituted that 10-year period during which beneficiaries have to distribute money from their IRAs and Roth IRAs. Not everybody was really happy about that, by the way. Today, we're going to be discussing the big surprise that has surfaced in the latest updated iteration of the Secure Act 2.0 that is now gaining steam in Congress. It was passed unanimously in the House on March 30th and will be up for a vote in the Senate at some point in April. And it, like I said, it appears to have broad bipartisan support. And unless the Senate gives this thing a birdbath, like they mark it up and revise it, it is likely to go into law based on what we discuss in today's podcast. Okay, before we address the big surprise in the latest House-approved version of the Secure Act 2.0, let's briefly review what the Secure Act 2.0 said when it came out of committee last May. In the podcast that I did at the time, I outlined 6 major changes to retirement planning that this law is proposing. If you want an in-depth discussion on all of that, check out the full podcast. The link is in the show notes. But for today's purposes, let's just touch briefly on them. First, it calls for phasing in an extension of that RMD age out to age 75. It calls for increasing catch-up provisions for IRAs and Roth IRAs. It provides for age-sensitive catch-up provisions ranging in for traditional retirement plans like 401ks and 403bs. The older you are, the more you get to make up for lost time with those retirement planning contributions. It describes a requirement where these catch-up provisions must be contributed to the Roth portion of your retirement plan. It tells you how much the government likes Roth IRAs and that they're not likely to go anywhere anytime soon. It talks about the ability to have your company match earmarked towards the Roth portion of your account. Remember, up until now, you have a match. It has to go into that tax-deferred portion of your 401k. This now gives you the ability to earmark the match towards your Roth. You'd likely receive a 1099 on that additional income, by the way. And it also talks about reducing the penalty, reducing and or eliminating the penalty for the RMD from 50% down to 25%, and in some cases, just making it go away altogether. Now, like I said, you can find the link to that podcast in the show notes for today's podcast. And I would recommend that you go back and refresh yourself on what was in the bill when it came out of committee, because it's almost all exactly the same except for one major change. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. The one thing that the previous version of the Secure Act 2.0 did not address was what happens if a beneficiary inherits a retirement account where the original account holder had already begun to receive required minimum distributions. Would they have to take RMDs from that account as well, or would they be exempt from RMDs and simply have to fully distribute the money by the end of the 10-year period per the Secure Act 1.0? I remember that the financial planning community, when this first came out, was absolutely up in arms. They were like, this is a crucial omission. How could you not opine on what's going to happen to people who are beneficiaries of IRAs where the RMDs were already being taken out? Well, in the latest piece of legislation, this is all spelled out perfectly. As it turns out, how and whether the 10-year rule applies depends on two crucial criteria. First, did the original IRA account holder die before or after their required beginning date? In other words, had they begun to receive the required minimum distributions? And secondly, is the beneficiary an eligible designated beneficiary, or EDB? And before we go any further, let's define who qualifies as an eligible designated beneficiary, or EDB. All of the following are eligible designated beneficiaries: surviving spouse, a minor child, a disabled person, a chronically ill person, a person not more than 10 years younger than the account holder, and finally, a designated beneficiary of an account holder who died before January 1st, 2020. We know that if you are an eligible designated beneficiary, EDB, of an IRA, the 10-year distribution rule does not apply to you. You get to continue to receive RMDs from the account based on your life expectancy. The only exception is the minor who inherits the IRA, say at age 15. He or she would have to receive RMDs based on their life expectancy until age 21, at which point then that 10-year rule would kick in. All right, now let's discuss what happens if you are not an EDB and you inherit an IRA. There are two possibilities. Either the original account holder had begun RMDs or they had. The answer to this question determines how this 10-year period is going to play out. First, let's address the beneficiary who inherited an IRA from someone who had not yet reached their required beginning date. For that person, a 10-year rule applies as usual. You will have to withdraw 100% of that IRA within 10 years of the death of the account holder, pretty cut and dried. The next scenario, however, is the big surprise in this legislation. What happens if you inherit an IRA? You are not an EDB, and the person from whom you inherited the IRA had already begun to take their RMDs. In that case, you would have to take RMDs based on your life expectancy and completely withdraw all the money within that 10-year period. So pretty huge change. And if this legislation goes through, and then, like I said, seems to have broad bipartisan support, then this will be the new law of the land moving forward. All right, the last scenario I want to address is simply this. What happens if you are not an EDB and you inherit a Roth IRA? Well, Roth IRA owners are not subject to RMDs and are therefore always considered to have died before their required beginning date. In other words, if you inherit a Roth IRA, regardless of whether you're an EDB or not, you will never have to take required minimum distributions. You'll simply have to distribute that Roth within that 10-year time period. Yet again, another huge benefit for having Roth IRAs, more flexibility for your beneficiaries. By the way, why would the federal government require you to take that money out within that 10-year time period if it's a Roth? Didn't they already get their tax, right? Well, guess what? The IRS wants to get all that tax-free money back into circulation. So they're going to require that you take that. Even if you don't spend it, you're going to put it into some sort of investment account that does get taxed. So this is the IRS's way of making sure that those tax-free dollars go back into distribution. Remember, with the Stretch Roth IRA, they never got to touch that money ever. It was tax-free forever, even to your heirs. Okay, so what are the implications for POZ planning? Well, it's all the more motivation for you to get your money shifted to the tax-free bucket, shifted to the Roth IRA. Pay taxes at your historically low tax rates so that your beneficiaries won't have to pay the taxes at the apex of their earning years at a period in time when taxes are likely to be much higher than they are today. Also, by having your money in Roth, you spare your beneficiaries from having to worry about taking RMDs should you actually die after your required beginning date, which statistically speaking is going to be most of us, right? All right, that is the podcast for today. Once again, if you're looking for help navigating all of these sometimes thorny issues, head over to davidmcknight.com. If you're an advisor who wants to become a member of our elite POZ advisor group, head over to powerofzero.com. Opt into our free 3-part video series. Happy to have a chat with you at any point during that series. Again, if you are looking for copies of my books in bulk, you can mix and match titles. Go to davidmcknightbooks.com. That's davidmcknightbooks.com. And don't forget about my documentary. It's still out there wherever you stream movies. That's The Power of Zero. The Tax Train is coming. That's The Power of Zero. The Tax Train is coming. Thanks so much for being with me this week, folks. And we will look forward to chatting with you same time next week.